Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning and welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and this podcast has been bringing you conversations with authors, entrepreneurs, mentors, and business leaders for 17 and a half years. And I am honored to be ranked in the top 1.5% of the most popular podcasts in the world. Today, I am joined by Ken Banta. He is the founder and principal of the Vanguard Network, and I'm going to apologize for my cat. He's having a fit. The Vanguard Network, a leadership community that brings together C-suite executives to tackle the challenges of modern business. And Ken is a trusted advisor to senior leaders, navigating disruption, crisis, and transformation. And with a career spanning global corporations and boardrooms, he helps leaders make the right calls when the path forward isn't clear. But before we dive in, this episode is sponsored by Frederick J. Fisher. Now, Fred is a pioneer in professional liability insurance, and he has more than 50 years of experience. He's the president of Fisher Consulting Group, the founder of ELM Insurance Brokers, and the author of Claims Made Insurance, the policy that changed the industry. Over the course of his career, Fred has helped reshape how the industry approaches liability and risk. He's also a founding member and past president of the Professional Liability Underwriting Society, where he received the prestigious, I never can say that word, Plus Founders Award. So for expert guidance on liability and risk, you can learn more about Fred and his work at fishercg.com. And you can also find him on LinkedIn. Now back to my guest, Ken Banta. Leadership is rarely about easy choices. It's about clarity and courage when the answers aren't obvious. And in his book, and it's sitting here in front of me, Seeing Around Corners, he distills the collective wisdom of top executives who have faced disruption, crisis, and transformation, and they come out stronger. So today we'll explore what true leadership looks like in uncertain times. And I have to mention, I think all times are uncertain. I'm not sure why we even talk like that. And how executives can prepare themselves and their organizations for what's next. Ken, good morning, and thank you for sending me your book.
Well, Denise, thanks for having me with you today. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And I have to apologize for my cat. I don't know why he's having hissy fits, but he is. So I hope nobody can hear me yelling at him. But before we dig in, I'd love to ask you, how do you like to show up in the world? And what do you want to share through this conversation? What do you want people to know about you and your work?
Well, I think that it's especially the importance of leadership thinking at all levels in organizations and in daily life. The book is drawing insights from so-called C-suite leaders, who are the people who are the direct reports to CEOs or the CEOs themselves in sometimes very large organizations. But what I found is that they face really very similar dilemmas and challenges to all of us, and therefore some of the things that they have to convey about addressing leadership challenges are very applicable to all of us in our day-to-day life and even in family life.
You mentioned that in the virtual green room because I was saying I'm not a C-suite person. I never have been. I never will be. But then you shared that you gave a copy of the book to your nephew. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Constantine is my godson, actually, in the UK, and he is a construction person working in the Cambridge area. He had a copy of the book that I sent to him, and he called me to say he had shared it with people on the site, and the foreman of the group had become so interested in it that he got a group of the other people to gather around and take a look through the book and identify some of the sections of it that would be really relevant to them. And what I think was striking to Constantine was the way in which so many of these observations by people who run corporations are also relevant to people who run construction projects. And that included things like, how to engage people in what they're doing and how to not only operate through command and control, but to lead from behind, meaning getting people to do things through persuasion versus command. Things like that seem to be very, very relevant to a very different world.
And I agree with you. And I had the same reaction that he had when I read it, because when these books land, and I'm always so appreciative of my guests who send me their books, I read them 2.5 times, sometimes three. I do a quick, flip the pages when it lands here. And depending on how far out you're scheduled to be on the show, I don't want to read it too early because I read so much, I will forget a lot of it. So when it's about a month ahead, I read it again, I review it. It's on Amazon, it's everywhere. And then the weekend before, and I did it this last weekend, I sit down and I really read it. And I've got sticky notes all over it. It's fat. It's got, but I agree with Constantine.
Yes.
I agree with him because I was a little bit, I don't know. I'm not C-suite. And I instantly had that bias. Shame on me. Once I opened it, I went, okay, this applies pretty much across the board. And I had to remind myself that C-suite people, big corporations, they're people too.
Exactly.
So I had to get out of my own way, is what I'm trying to say. So you often say that leadership is tested in moments of crisis. And when do we not have crisis? And I'm not being sarcastic. Seems like everything is a crisis these days. So Ken, how do you define real leadership in these circumstances?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I think leadership is different from management, and there's been a lot written about this, but sometimes these things get confused in people's minds, and I think that all management is not necessarily leadership, but leadership requires management. And what I mean is that you can be very good at getting things done in a kind of consistent fashion. You can be very good at passing on direction to other people, taking back things you're hearing and passing those things on. Those are all aspects of management work, which are very important. But leadership is that additional element of really stating a clear sense of purpose and direction and inspiring people to follow you and to get the job done, often in circumstances which are really very challenging. And I would add, to this as well, Denise, that it's important probably to talk about good leadership because not all leadership is good. There are plenty of examples through history and today of bad leaders, and they cause trouble. They're very effective, but they're trouble-causing leaders. And I think it's always important to also look for what makes someone a good leader. And I think a good leader has those qualities that I described. But in addition, they have a really strong moral compass and they have a sense of positive purpose. They're working to improve the company or improve the world. They're not working to bring other people down.
And I took that away from the book. What I took away from several, I have to look at my sticky notes, but was that leaders, in your estimation, are people who can look forward. They can understand or at least extrapolate what their activities are now are going to either help or damage going down the long ways down the road. Not just, oh, let's fix this and move on to the next thing. They're able to say, if we do this now, these are the possible results.
Yes, I think so. And another aspect too is, I think, an ability to bring other people along with you. And by that, I mean not just convincing people to follow where you're going, but also to make an extra effort to develop other people and to mentor people. So, I think a hallmark of great leaders is also that they leave their a positive impact on people who are following them and develop people to lead as they move forward, they develop leaders who can move forward after them. That's, I think, another important factor because to be able to do that, you do have to step out from just your own self and think about how other people are going to be able to improve and grow.
And that leads me to my next question. In Seeing Around Corners, you bring together stories from top executives, obviously, and some of those stories are pretty amazing. But what patterns did you notice in how they approach disruption? Was there any particular patterns that had you saying, "Huh, that works"?
Yeah, so with disruption, I think that no matter what perspective you're taking on what's going on today in the world, I think disruption is certainly at the center of things, more so than any time, at least in the last few decades. There's been periods in history that have probably been even more disruptive, but this period ranging from disruption in the United States in different ways to China trade policy to Russia, there's a lot of stuff going on. What I think is the hallmark of great leaders in this area is that they take these situations and look at them, first in a big picture way to understand where things are going, and as the title of the book suggests, see around corners. That is, they look beyond the immediate events to see where those things are going to take them. For example, the current uproar over tariffs. The tariffs have a huge direct impact on a business today, but really effective leaders are also thinking about, what will that effect be in another year? Are there ways to adapt to this new situation that will mitigate some of the impact if that's what they need to do? Those are the sorts of things that leaders do. But then to really be able to take control of a disruptive situation, I find that really effective leaders break things down into bite-sized pieces. It can be quite overwhelming to try to address some of these very large issues, but I think really good leaders find that if they take that big challenge and break it down into manageable pieces and then stepwise work on those pieces, it's surprising sometimes how much they can get done that way. And it's a technique for mastering complexity, really.
And I was going to ask you how leaders see around corners, but I think you just explained it.
Yeah, it's one. I think that's part of it. The other way that really good leaders, I think, are always uh, curious, and they're always asking other people what they think as well as trying to explore things by themselves. So again, I think, a really good leader on the front of say tariff or trade disruption, to some degree they can draw their own conclusions from things. They can read different accounts of what's going on in the world, and very often I think good leaders also ask people around them what they think about it. They don't necessarily believe everything they're hearing, but they're getting a variety of different inputs so that then they can kind of triangulate for themselves what they think the right steps are and how to handle it. A related aspect too, I think, Denise, is what I would call sensing mechanisms. And by that, I mean really good leaders, I think, have an ability to always be sensing and listening to what's going on around them. It's like a kind of like a radar system, I think, almost, where they're seeing and hearing and feeling where shifts in the environment are moving, possibly doing this in advance of what a lot of other people are seeing, often aided by people in their own organization. And if it's even a small organization may have, for example, salespeople or other colleagues who are out talking to customers or to others. And by taking advantage of those contexts and then the insights that these individuals have, often a senior leader will be able to discern things that are occurring long before others see them. And that's a good reason for, I think, senior leaders to always be very close to the people who are at the front lines, even if it's a small organization, to be in touch with the people who are doing the work and talking to customers or clients or others, because they are the ones who have, in some ways, the greatest insights.
Well, they're listening and they're asking questions. And if they feel comfortable bringing that back to management, that sounds like a win-win to me.
I absolutely, and I think the biggest issue is that sometimes they don't feel comfortable because, in many organizations, there's a very hierarchical feeling. The senior people distance themselves from the people at the working level, and that can be driven by all kinds of different things, including egos. But it's probably not. I don't think it's very healthy, and it's also risky because you then become detached from reality.
We're seeing that a lot. And I'm going to just go ahead and say, listen, with social media being what it is, it's kind of hard to hide much from us. And even if we don't have the truth, all of a sudden we're suspicious. So how do you how do you advise people to get out in front of gossip, watercolor, water cooler gossip? How, we hear a lot about transparency. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, I think that it certainly begins at the top. So you can't have transparency in an organization where the CEO and the CEO's direct reports are not themselves behaving with transparency. And also, I think you have to be wary of people who talk about transparency but don't practice it. It's, one of those words that everyone likes to throw around, but do they actually do it? What I think can be very effective, and I've used this in past engagements with various CEOs that I've worked with, it's been very effective to have a regular communication from the CEO about a whole range of topics to everybody in the organization in a very conversational fashion. It can be video, it could be a text message, it can be any one of a number of channels, but the key to it is it's a direct communication from the CEO to everyone. And it's remarkable how much you can achieve with that because you mentioned, water cooler gossip about things. If the CEO is aware of what's going on in the organization and what's on people's minds, which he or she learns by having that feedback mechanism that I talked about, then they can address these things head on and very matter-of-factly. For example, many of you may have heard the rumor that we're about to be taken over by X, Y, or Z company. I can tell you that we're in talks with them about a partnership, but we're not talking about a takeover. I can't tell you more about it right now because of the negotiations, but I wanted you to be the first to understand it. So, with that kind of communication, you put an end to speculation, but you're honest. You're not saying there isn't something going on, but the something going on is different than what people are speculating.
And I think that's smart. And that also impacts our stock market when you're hiding things. When,
Absolutely.
people are not, they don't know where their money is, where it's going, they'll just bail on you. And it gets kind of frightening. So, and I'm going back to COVID. When COVID started, it didn't directly impact me because my office is in my home and I don't go anywhere if I can avoid it. I'm an introvert. But I remember people making what I thought was just a horrendous mistake. I'm a web developer by trade, and I'm always looking at other websites and how people are marketing. I'm very curious about things like this. And I noticed that some very big companies just panicked and disappeared. And I took it upon myself to boss them around a bit. I sent out about for 2 days, I sent out emails to companies that never even acknowledged that I had gotten in touch with them. But I said, listen, people can't find you. They don't have a phone number for you. You're not answering your phones. Have your web developer put something on the front page of your website. I don't care how big or small you are, saying we're here, we're working, we're not ignoring you, we're still here. And you would be amazed by how many people said, I never thought of that. What? Why did you never think that's the smartest thing I thought it was pretty smart. But a lot of people said, oh, yeah, yeah, I'll go do that right now. You can't just disappear when there's something going on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight for people at all levels in organizations or in even in family and other groups in colleges and schools. There's some of these tendencies that I understand from psychologists are almost sort of tribalist behaviors that are ingrained in our genetics going back a long time. And I think some of those things are positive factors and some of them are negative. And I think some of the negative ones can be a tendency to hide from problems. And as we know, that's probably not usually the best approach. It's always going to be more productive to surface them. And in a again, thinking of a leadership role in whatever size group or organization you're in, you know, it, there's sometimes a feeling that, well, we can't tell everybody all the details about something that's happening because some of it's confidential. For example, transactions and things like that. So therefore, we're going to say nothing. But actually, you can usually say something that's honest and clear, and people will understand why you can't say the other part. I think the example I gave of, the rumor that the company is being taken over was driven by the reality that there was a partnership discussion underway with another company. Well, you can say that without disclosing all the terms and conditions of the partnership, or you can say that there's a confidential discussion underway about a non-takeover decision. But almost always there's a way to frame the news that people think they're hearing in an accurate way, and it then relieves a lot of the stress and tension.
I guess my question, Ken, is don't you need to jump in front of that right away, though? You don't need to wait for social media to start ripping you apart.
No, of course not. I think it's again, it's where these sensing mechanisms come in.
That's it. That's the word.
It's whether it's your informal network of people in the workforce, or it's people outside your organization who are keeping an eye out on things, and get sort of early warning signals that some sort of topic is coming up about you or the organization, long before it becomes a firestorm. And very often you can head that off, or put an end to it by getting out there ahead of time. And the other thing too is that when it comes to so-called risk management and crisis management, 9 times out of 10, the things that have turned into a crisis are actually something that could have been managed into a much more orderly situation. And unfortunately, organizations and people don't seem to learn that lesson very well. I know a couple of people in law firms that specialize in risk solutions to, for example, cybersecurity. And the number of times that the same organization has the same repeated problem because they haven't really solved the systemic issue they have. They simply address the crisis when it occurs, and don't really fully resolve the problem is really quite remarkable. That if organizations would take the time to learn from experience, they'd be often a lot better positioned to avoid the same bad experiences.
It's almost like they don't have a standard operating procedure built.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, that worked last time. Let's just address it and get back to work.
Yep. No, that's it's one of the kind of remarkable things about organizations is that they often don't learn from experience.
That's a shame. And it shouldn't be that difficult. Somebody should be keeping notes. You have advised global corporations. Can you share an example where the right leadership decision, because we're talking about crises, during a crisis made all the difference?
Uh, yeah, I would share one example where I was working with a CEO named Fred Hassan at a very large pharma company, and we had a situation where there was a drug that was in development, and there was a rumor that the sort of protocols around the study of the drug and the keeping the study results so-called blinded. In other words, you shouldn't hear about the study results until the study is complete for all kinds of good reasons. That somehow that protocol had been violated, and that the company knew about the results prior to when they should have. And this caused a huge issue around trust and credibility of the company, and the really the ethics even of the CEO in this case were questioned. And what I think worked extremely well was that the CEO really managed to rally everyone in the organization around how to respond to this issue in a very calm and stable way. It involved uh, methodically getting out information about what the real story had been, methodically talking to journalists and scientific people about how the study had not been, the study protocol had not been violated, and here's the evidence of why it had not. So a very sustained, consistent response, uh, largely carried out in a very calm and orderly way. So the environment was one where you could have had hysteria around this. This is billions of dollars of value at stake. But I think we handled it in a overall very methodical fashion, and in a way that really helped to build or rebuild trust with these different stakeholders through the way that we handled the issue. So I think that's a good example of where this type of crisis can be, you'd rather not have it, but if you are going to have a crisis, how you handle it is really very important. And that, by the way, was a situation where I don't think anyone could have foreseen the crisis, as we were saying just a minute ago. In some cases, you wonder why companies or organizations don't learn from experience and keep repeating their crises. This was something that really came out of the blue and was very, very hard to predict. So it was a kind of like a black swan type of event. But I think that I'm still very pleased with the way that we dealt with it and the fact that at the end of the day, the whole situation calmed down. And after a period of time, we were vindicated by the facts.
And while I always take notes when I'm listening to my guests because I learned so much from you. But while you were recounting that tale, I wrote down corporate espionage with the question mark.
Yeah, I don't think in this case it was a corporate espionage situation exactly in terms of another company causing trouble. It seemed to have emerged from just some skepticism by some experts in the field of in this case of cardiology, who just believed that there were that that there were signals being given in this trial that were negative. Uh, I don't think that they were necessarily had it in for the company, although they might have felt, that a big organization like this couldn't be trusted or something. It didn't seem, though, that it was really a sort of a kind of organized effort to cause commercial damage. It seemed more like science people raising doubts that then turned out to be unfounded.
That makes sense. But I'm convinced that you deal with a lot of corporate espionage, though. You must. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yes, well, I mean, I think especially now with the area of cybersecurity,
Right.
where you have not so much other companies, but bad actors out there that are seeking to ransom, to get ransom for their demands. That's as you know, a huge and growing problem, and it's yeah, very, very hard to control or manage, and you can't really anticipate it easily either. I mean, you can have systems in place and sort of playbooks for how you would handle a case of cybersecurity, cyber espionage, but you can't really anticipate every possible attack. The other thing that is interesting is that organizations often do have playbooks for how they think they should handle something like this, and then they often slightly get kind of sort of either thrown out or everyone realizes that that playbook doesn't really apply to this particular situation, so they've got to invent a new approach. And for me, that is sort of signals another thing that I find very important today in dealing with complex situations and issues like cyber attacks and others. The two words that I think are really vital are agility and adaptability. And agility meaning the ability to shift very quickly from one plan of operation to another, one plan of attack to another, one plan of defense to another, and then the ability to adapt to sort of see where things are heading. And in some cases, you can't. There might be a sort of a tidal wave of something happening in your business. You can't necessarily stop the tidal wave, but if you're very, very adaptable and agile, sometimes you can maneuver your way around it or turn what looked like a problem to an advantage. And I think those two qualities are things that have been important throughout history. But I do feel that in today's environment, they are perhaps the top two qualities that you need to see in a really effective.
Absolutely. And I'm still writing down notes. Every time you say something, I'm like, ooh, 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 that's cool. I've got to ask more about that. One thing, and I have to tell you, and I'm looking at my sticky notes in the book, um, hiring. I mean, we're going a little bit off topic a bit here, but on page 164, and this is from Andy Bromberg, he's a chairman of ECO, and he says we use a principle at ECHO called hell yes or no. And I agree with him. Let's talk about that.
Well, I think that he may be putting it in a certain way, but I think it's the importance when you're looking at recruitment of people to feel that there is a real compelling um, linkage between that individual and the mission of the company. And so it's a kind of a gut instinct versus simply looking at credentials. And again, one of the CEOs I worked with in the past was once I think, asked by either a journalist or a board member about why was it that he was bringing back into his leadership team so many people who'd worked for him in the past and wasn't subjecting everybody to a battery of sort of HR type tests for their capabilities. And he said, well, after being a successful turnaround CEO for almost 20 some years, I've identified the qualities that I need to find in people, and that's based on that experience. It's not based on a lot of different tests or other sort of tools. And I've pressure tested some of these individuals 2 and 3 times already through real live experience in the companies working for me. So I don't need to go through those exercises to identify who's right. And he also said to me separately, he said, how long does it take you to identify whether somebody is going to be a good fit working with you in a senior role? And the same CEO said, if I see that their credentials are all in order, what I'm really looking for is the right chemistry and the right sense of kind of purpose in the person. And he said, I can find that out in 15 minutes.
Or less.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's that,
Yeah.
and people talk about, they often talk about a gut instinct as if it's sort of not really based on data. But, I think the way I see what people call gut instinct is usually, the accumulated knowledge that they have of people and places and things that, after a period of time is, you might call it gut instinct, but it's really all of that accumulated insight that they're bringing to bear on a situation that doesn't involve questionnaires and tests. It involves conversation and really just a sense of the individual that is often, very, very accurate.
And listen, I pay a lot of attention to my instincts. They've kept me safe a long time,
Yeah.
many times. And I think so many of us do. They'll say, oh man, I almost got hit by a car, but you didn't because you turned very quickly. We've
Yep.
all had that happen. So instinct, I think, is important. I wanted to ask you, how should leaders balance transparency with reassurance when they're speaking to their teams? Because and we've gone over this a bit, but teams are important. And they are teams. They're not just disparate people sitting in different desks in different parts of the building. You have to be in conversation. You have to be asking questions. You almost have to mastermind with them. How do you deepen those discussions?
Well, I think there's sort of two different ways that you can reach people, especially if it's quite a lot of people. I mean, sometimes your team is 5 people. That's a little more direct, right? They all see you and talk to you every day, perhaps. But when you get to, as they say, more people than will fit into a room at one time, then you're into a different level of
I'm
communication. And
sorry.
yeah.
I'm coughing on you. I didn't
Oh,
mean to. I
not at
apologize.
all. No, so I was just saying that there's a difference in a way between having a team that fits into one room and even if that's virtual, it's a group that can fit on a screen, right? And you can see each other. Once you get beyond that number, then you're into a different type of communication and interaction. So when it becomes a larger group, I think you can do a lot of direct transmission of ideas and thoughts through video and email and other means. But it's also really useful to have small group discussions or one-on-ones. But small group focus groups are really valuable. But how you run them is really extremely important. A lot of senior leaders use small group discussions as a kind of way for them to tell other people what they're doing or what they're thinking. So it's, I'm glad you all came here and let me tell you what's on my mind and let me tell you what my agenda is. And I want you all to understand that so you can go away and follow my agenda. The other way to go at it is much more complicated and challenging, but it's to actually involve the people in the room in helping solve problems for the organization. And there's Mary Barra, who is the CEO of General Motors. I think it appears to exemplify the second type I talked about. She uses small group discussions as a way to involve people at the working level in thinking about big issues. And also she uses these meetings as a way of surfacing problems that they may have that they may be seeing that would affect the whole company. And so, for example, I recall an account of one of these meetings that she held with some people, in one of the manufacturing sites. and they said, we're still having problems with a certain part that's just not working properly, and everyone, further up in the chain is sort of saying they think the problem is solved, but it's not. And so she said, well, let's spend this hour together identifying what that problem is, and then I want your advice on how we can solve it. And that's what happened. And then she went back and took that information to, the top of the organization to create a task force to address that problem. But she would never have really, no one would have really known that the real world situation was what it was unless she had had this interaction with these people at the working level. So, it's a really great way of illustrating how important it is to stay in touch and to be close to the people who do the work, because they not only tell you things they need to hear from you about how the company is doing, what they need to know about where you're going. But additionally, they can give you, priceless insights into what you, the CEO, need to do differently, or issues that you need to focus on that you might not have thought about otherwise. Did I lose you there?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
Um, so I'm going to have to figure out what's going on with my microphone. Let's expand a bit on Mary Barra's story because when I was reviewing the book, when I was, writing a review for it, that fascinated me because she was there for a long time, but she was stuck for a long time, as I recall it.
yeah, she's I think, and I don't know her personally, but I'm actually focusing on her for another thing that I'm writing about, that concept of being adaptable. And I think that, she's someone who has been in a CEO role at a huge company for an extraordinarily long time, and she's been she's been a proponent of the electric car for maybe decades, certainly a long period of time. And what's interesting is that she's shown an incredible ability to adapt to situations. So there have been ebbs and flows in people's appetite for electric cars and the right kind of technologies to make that happen. And what to me is really impressive is that throughout this all, she's not, wavered in her commitment to the concept, but she's definitely adapted how to get there. For example, I don't know that a hybrid car was originally part of the vision, but they've, of course, adapted the concept of a hybrid automobile that would be a kind of a intermediate step between conventional gasoline-powered engines and electrically powered engines. And I think in hindsight it all looks very obvious, but I think that she was one of the champions of a kind of, okay, let's adapt to the fact that the electric car may not be ready for prime time yet, but there is a value in having electric combined with gasoline powered engines. That and countless other examples, I think, of her adapting to the environment. I don't quite know what she's doing and GM are doing in relation to the tariff situation for imported car parts and things like that, but I would bet that she's doing something very innovative.
I would imagine. After I, read that, I went and I started looking her up because she's fascinating, and she really is.
Nope, very impressive. And of course, while there are, women and other individuals that are, not white men in lots of roles, it's quite striking that someone like her can be not only leading a auto industry giant, which is pretty much a male-dominated world, but also to be having done it, I think, probably longer than any other person in the business.
Exactly. But there was a point, I'm trying to remember it now, but there was a point where they were not going to really move her up or do much with her because they felt like, and I'm paraphrasing, I'll have to go read my own notes, that she just didn't fit the mold.
Yeah, and I think that's often the case with really good leaders, and um, the the challenge I think often for very good leaders is that they often strike people as not really they're not really managers sometimes. They're people who have a vision. They're very big picture. They are sometimes very charismatic. They can scare people, because they don't fit a mold. And the challenge for them is to fit the mold enough to be able to move onward and upward, but not to lose the special edge that will make them a great CEO. And it's like those situations where so many people who go through college, for example, who are, sort of kind of mediocre students, turn out to be terrific leaders because they just don't happen to be, academically brilliant, but they are, very, very strong in many other ways. And it's, another reason why, companies are probably wise not just to look at grade point averages of people when they're thinking about who to hire, because the things that get you a 4.0 are not the things that necessarily make you successful in the workplace.
That is true. So, Ken, what advice do you give leaders who are stepping into their first major leadership challenge? I'm guessing that just stepping in that door for the first day is a leadership challenge.
Yeah, I think that the a couple key things are certainly to first of all be have a lot of self-awareness, meaning not just understanding yourself, but understanding how other people are seeing you. So, you'll do much better if you recognize whether other people are intimidated by the role you're playing, or whether they are jealous of the role that you're playing, especially people who perhaps thought they should take that role. Being very again, having those abilities to sense what's going on around you and to respond. Those are all aspects of emotional intelligence, EQ, that are, really very, very critical. And often people get promoted into roles because of their accomplishments in, their own sort of self achievement. But the minute you are leading a larger group of people, those things don't matter so much anymore. You need to be able to bring other people with you. And so that EQ element is incredibly important. And I think, how do you develop that? I think probably having some trusted people around you who you can ask, am I operating in a proper way? Are people annoyed with the way I behave? Do I listen enough in meetings? That kind of sort of like a kitchen cabinet. I think it's probably good for everybody in a senior role to have one. And ideally not just based on people who are your direct reports, because they're sometimes a bit biased, but finding people several layers down in the organization or who are outside the organization to just give you some unvarnished advice. And what's interesting is by asking for that advice, or being perceived to be doing that, you really strengthen your profile enormously with everybody, because they see that as a really positive behavior. And I think the other thing too is to really take time to understand what the real issues are. You'll often get told that this or that thing is what really matters, but it may be that this or that thing is actually just a symptom of a bigger thing. And it's, I think, worth taking the time to really assess, not only what are the three things you want to accomplish, which might be very visible, but how you'll get there is very, 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 very different. That may be very, very different from what you imagine, to achieve your goals. And taking the time to think that through, and to be sort of pressure test the things that you think are the right steps to take, is extremely important. And then the final thing, I think, is back to agility and adaptability. Sometimes people get very fixed on a strategy that they've set, and they seem to take it as a kind of a badge of honor that they don't change their strategy. Nothing has changed about our strategy. We're continuing to do what we said we were going to do 5 years ago. Well, that's actually sometimes insane. I mean, quite often, the world has changed, and yet your strategy stays the same. And that idea that consistency is more important than adaptability is, I think, crazy.
Oh, the worst thing you ever want to hear anybody say is, "Oh, we've always done it this way.
Exactly. And
I
yet they
gotta
do
go
all the time.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sticking around."
No, and the number of CEOs who tell boards that that they are sticking with the strategy, and that nothing,
Right.
some, every now and then that may be right, because nothing has changed in the world, but very often, things have changed, and that what they really would best be saying is we're making a radical change in our strategy because there's been a radical change in the world.
And you said, and I'm going to quote you a little bit here on your quotable wisdom. The modern executive wakes up every day to a world of constant transformation and disruption, where everyone from board members to stockholders to digitally savvy consumers to social media trolls is a potential stakeholder in any and every business. And I will not mark up a book, but I've got a sticky note in front and, you know, all over it. I boxed it in with sticky notes. That is so important.
Yeah, I think that what you're maybe getting at there is certainly very important in my mind, which is that there's always been a variety of stakeholders that you have, whether you're, running a scout troop or you're running a global corporation. But I think the diversity of those stakeholders and the impact they can have has certainly just grown exponentially. And, you need to be really very, very aware of all of those different channels, if you like. And just the other day, I was working with a person who was preparing to hopefully win a job and then how to work in that job. And one of her colleagues said to me, or maybe she said to me herself, I really need to take a look at my Facebook page because I don't really know what's on there. I mean, I've been, I have, I had things posted on there from when I was in college, and sure enough, she went back to her Facebook page, and there were a bunch of things that weren't, there was nothing really terrible there, but it was a lot of, party images of her, in a college situation, and here she is 10 years later applying for a very serious science-based job. And so, she went onto Facebook and deleted all those outdated pieces of stuff, which was probably a really smart thing to do. But, it's that kind of peripheral vision that you need sometimes to think about, what are the things going on out there that might, affect your reputation or your career, and similarly that might affect your company or your organization. It's, there's as you were saying, social media in its various forms has a lot of, positive aspects to it, but it's got a lot of negative aspects as well.
It absolutely does. And that's good advice to give to people. And I give it all the time, when we're building a new website or I've got a client who says, I just don't do this work anymore. I'm starting, on a parallel track, but I need to start over. And I'll instantly say, go back into your social media, go to Perplexity AI, do a deep dive on yourself. You're going to find little small businesses or comments that you made that maybe shouldn't even be out there anymore. Clean it up and then start building.
That's really good advice. And I didn't know about Perplexity, but I have just
Oh
written it.
yeah. Yeah. Perplexity AI, it's free. And I do most of my research there, not Chat GPT.
Interesting. I'll take a look. I do use ChatGPT a lot, but now I have another tool. So thanks for that.
Well, listen, when I was looking for you, I went straight to Perplexity.
Great. Well, hopefully you didn't find anything too incriminating.
Nothing, no, nothing at all. I didn't do that deep of a dive. But I will always go to Perplexity because listen, I get, constantly, daily, Monday through Sunday, people wanting to come on this show, which I'm proud of that. But I need to know who you are. And I will go to Perplexity and I'll say, okay, tell me about Ken Banta. What is he doing? Blah, blah, blah. And is he a good fit for my show? Because if you're not, you're not. And I don't want
Yeah.
to waste your time or mine. And it came back very positive, and it told me why you were a good fit for my show.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to definitely go take a look at
Yeah,
that.
I'll go find that document and I'll send it to you.
Oh, yeah, that'd be terrific. I'd love to.
Yeah. Yeah, but perplexity.ai, I love them.
I've
And
got
it's
it.
free. Yeah. So, how do you see the role in leadership evolving over the next decade? And I know that's a big question because things move so quickly, but are you looking around corners to see things that might be popping up that, and we're changing from the guy in the corner office who just says, do what you're told, nobody gets hurt. What are you seeing evolving from that?
Yeah, so I think that one thing to keep an eye on is the Gen Z generation of people who are going to be moving up into, sort of middle to upper management roles over the next 10 years or so. And that group, I think, will have a lot more technological savvy than people today in those roles. So I think you'll find that sort of senior leaders of various kinds are much more able to utilize complex data and to find things for themselves on the internet and all the other things that, right now someone might delegate to someone else. So I think there's that element. I think there's also going to be I think a generation of people who are very concerned about environmental and other issues that that they see as kind of long-term challenges for the planet. Now, it might be that they'll change their tune on that a bit as they get older, but I get a feeling that there's a real sense of urgency to them about that in some ways they feel they've inherited some very uh, bad situations and they need to do something to change it. So it'd be interesting to see if some of the leaders of the future are very sort of cause-driven or maybe more cause-driven than today. And then I think that that same group also have very high expectations for behavior by leaders. They think that it's very important that leaders do what they say and say what they do. And again, that might be a little bit of a overly simplistic view of what leaders ought to be like. But I think there's that. I think they feel like they hold leaders to a higher standard, so it would then follow that they hold themselves to a high standard. So I think those are some of the sort of character elements of leadership in the future. And then, the other aspect of it is going to be, sort of what seems to be obvious, but I'm not sure, no one's quite sure how that will work out, is that, leaders in almost all areas are going to need to be very global. It's probably true that every industry, every sector is affected by global trends these days, but I think increasingly they're going to need to be involved in those trends. And, for example, the in industrial companies in the U.S., I think for some time probably saw the leaders saw their role as addressing the U.S. market, but now they need to be aware of supply chains that are starting in China. Therefore, they need to be aware of what's happening with Chinese policy and decision making. They need to know what the costs of transport are. So there's a lot of global connectedness to things that affects really practically every kind of work you could be doing, including nonprofits. So I think that'll be another piece of it, is that leaders that are successful will be very, very global in their mindset. So those are some of the things I think that we should watch.
And how about AI? People, and I hear this all the time, I'm terrified of it. Why? You've actually been using it for much longer than you even know about. It's been around for a while.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I see too many instances, especially in the podcasting industry, I see too many instances where people will just, I'm seeing AI podcasts, which I'm not going to listen to that. I'm sorry, I just won't. I want the human element, but that's just me. But AI, I think, is going to play a lot in business culture
Yeah, I
going
think that.
forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of technological element that I mentioned would include AI in a big way in terms of these future leaders. And I think, I think that, it really is still hard to t tell what the real impact of AI is going to be on people and on the world. It's a revolutionary factor, but is it a revolutionary tool or is it a revolutionary new way of doing? Is it a substitute for humans or is it a tool for human behavior? And I kind of feel that it's going to end up being more of a hopefully a tool than a
Yeah,
replacement.
me too.
And but it's, we're right in the middle of this wave, and it's very hard to see the forest for the trees on this one. For example, if you go back in time to the beginning of the use of computers and computing in business, I think you'll find that there was similar doomsday type scenarios of, computers are going to, they're the end of our meaningful life as human beings, and they're going to take over the world. And I mean, they have taken over a lot of aspects of work, but are they actually destroying life or making it a bit better? Probably on the whole, making things a bit better, and taking some of the uh, less interesting things out of daily life. So I guess to me that's going to be actually one of the big challenges for leaders of the future is to put the right safeguards around things like AI and to find the right uses for it. It's for example, generative AI is great for drafting initial ideas, giving you further thoughts for something you want to write. Probably a bad idea to use it to write the whole thing because
Oh, yeah.
We've all
I
seen
see
what,
it all the
yeah, when you
time.
see it, and it's totally visible what AI generated things look like. And so, I have given some advice to people who were creating a CV, and they used AI to help them gather their thoughts. I said, but you really need to personalize that gathering of the thoughts with your own touch, or you're gonna not get very far with this piece. So I think I'm sort of with you, I think, on it in terms of uh, it is early to tell, but I think that the way it should go is that it's a tool for humans, not humans becoming a tool of AI.
I agree with you 100%. And, going back to technology, I'm a nerd in stilettos. I have a computer science degree that nobody cares about but me because I had to pay for it. And I do have a lot of stilettos. It's embarrassing to open my closet. It looks like Nordstrom's threw up in there. Nordstrom threw up in there. But yeah, mobile phones. I will not use my mobile phone, my iPhone for business. I just won't. And I really do need my privacy. So maybe five people in the world that even have that number. I'll be honest with you, most of the time the ringer is off or a cat is sitting on it. It's not that important to me.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
my desktop, very important. My iPads, equally as important, but I'm not going to tie myself to a phone. And it's really not a phone. It's a computer with an app that turns it into a phone. So I'm careful with it. Very, very careful with it.
Well, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Mostly I just don't want it taking over my life. People say, well, I need to text you. No, you don't. You can email me. I'll respond. But, we have to have our own barriers or boundaries, I guess. And that's going to be decisions people need to make. And I like what you said about, you know, making in the new cultures and the new leadership, I don't think you said boundaries, but making sure that people know how to use it and how to not abuse it.
Yeah, and that may be a very important role of leaders at all levels in providing a kind of framework or boundaries of use of technologies and when they're appropriate. It's interesting to see schools, for example, in some cases banning mobile phones from the classroom, and it's probably a perfectly good idea. I mean, it's a distraction, and you can always catch up on things at the end of the day or during lunch. But should you be texting during your math class? No.
No, no. And people say, oh, well, they need it in case of emergency. Well, you can have your phone set up to where it can make emergency calls only.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not a teacher and I wouldn't be around small children anyway. For I have no reason to be, but if I and I'll give you an example. I was at Christmas Eve one time, church, the church service at Christmas Eve. It's the only time I go. And it was a beautiful service. And when it was time for the intermission, I turned, stood up, walked past this young family, mother, father, three beautiful children. None of them were looking at each other. They were not conversing, heads down, phones and iPads
Oh no. Yeah.
in church. And that just stuck with me. It's like, why are you even here? So I was being, a bit brutal about it, and I still am. I still don't understand why they bothered to drive over there.
Yeah, and that's, I think so. I would tend to agree too that that's the sort of an example of the kind of thing that leaders going forward are going to need to sort out for their own organizations in terms of utilization of AI, how you use it. It's already becoming a big issue in, what's appropriate, what's not. How do you protect, once you put something into a generative AI system, is that information actually still secure and private, or is it not? And
It's not.
yeah,
It's not.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
it AI, chat, perplexity, all of them, they're using whatever you're putting in there. You think, oh, I'm just having a conversation with who I call Uncle Chat. I got mad at him one night. He was giving me bad code, literally. He was giving me bad code, and I know code. And I was kind of yelling. I said, all right, Uncle Chat, I'm mad at you. You're hallucinating. Go to your room. And he literally said, you're right, Denise. I'm sorry. I am giving you bad information and I will do better. Good night. And it hung up on me. So, but that conversation is recorded somewhere.
Oh yeah, there's that element of it. So I think
Yeah.
the leadership element, that's the type of thing that people are going to need to wrestle with in terms of just how they, run their organizations and how they, what's acceptable, what's not in the workplace. And it's definitely still a kind of half-written chapter, that one.
Very much. Well, listen, Ken, thank you. We're out of time. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you for sending me that book. And I wanted to ask you where you got all these quotes, but I know where you got them. So, um, because you interviewed all these people and I'm glad you did. So before we wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you and where can they learn more about your book, your work and buy your book?
Let's see. I think Banta at vanguardnetwork.nyc is my direct email. And they can also come to our website, which is the vanguardnetwork.com. So those are two ways to get in touch. And then the book is on Amazon and other online sellers. Seeing Around Corners, and my name, Ken Banta, as the author.
It's a very easy read. And when I say easy, it's because, you've talked with these people, they're sharing their stories, and I love stories. So every single one of these, they may be from companies, people I've never heard of, but I'm writing notes. I'm taking a lot of notes
Oh,
because
great.
there's
Well,
so much in here to learn.
that's good to hear. And I think that, yeah, what seems to appeal to people is that it is in bite-sized pieces. So these are not long chapters or academic sounding things. They're, one page or less in many cases, insights on a specific topic from somebody. So it's an easy, there, I think it's grouped according to topics, but it's easy to page through and find things that are relevant, I hope.
It is, especially if you love sticky notes the way I do. And index cards. So, well, listen, everybody, this is where we have to leave it for today on your Partner in Success Radio. My guest, Ken Banta, Banta, has shared so much about what it really takes to lead through disruption and transformation, and how to recognize the signals of change, avoid common mistakes that leaders make under pressure, and keep teams aligned when the path forward just isn't obvious. So, for those of you listening, I really encourage you to connect with Ken, learn more about his work with the Vanguard Network, and pick up his book, Seeing Around Corners. I love it. It's a great book. It's full of practical wisdom, and you can use it right now to strengthen your leadership. I am Denise Griffitts. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Ken, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I look forward to having you come back anytime you have something more to say or share.
Thank you.
You're invited.
Great.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.